You're gonna be booming.
Yeah, really
It's
loud.
gonna be a hot mic. Okay. So you want to try it now?
Excuse me. We're going to be getting started in a couple minutes, so please start finding your seats. Thank you.
Vivid dreams. Oh, so do I.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Should I speak up? I'm just trying to see. Okay, great, great. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Von Reagan Bledsoe. I'm a junior here at Duke. I'm from Chicago. And I'm here to welcome you all to Revisiting the Takeover, a commemoration of the 55th anniversary of the Allen Building Takeover, as well as to introduce you to the panelists for this event. I hope that you all are excited as I am. And now to introduce our esteemed guests that we'll be hearing from this evening. First, allow me to introduce Catherine LeBlanc. Of all of, yes, yes. Of all of Catherine LeBlanc's personal and professional achievements, she is most proud of her role as mother to 3 adult children and grandmother to 3. She is also very proud of her educational accomplishments. Having graduated from Duke as a member of the 5th class of Black students admitted, earned her master's degree in business administration from Harvard University School of Business as a member of the 16th class of women admitted, and having been awarded 6 honorary doctorate degrees from some of the nation's historically Black colleges and universities. Catherine's professional career has included work in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. At the national level, she was appointed executive director of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities by President Bill Clinton. She also worked in White House personnel in his administration. Catherine has worked at 2 major corporations, the General Electric Company and Scientific Atlanta. In the nonprofit sector, she worked for an urban school superintendent and the dean of a university business school. A longtime member of the National Black MBA Association, Catherine was just honored by the organization last week as an esteemed legacy leader for Black History Month. She co-created the organization's Leadership Institute, which has trained, inspired, and influenced thousands of aspiring Black corporate managers and entrepreneurs. She has also co-authored one book, which is the history of this organization. Next, I'd like to introduce Michael McBride. Michael McBride worked as a computer programmer and as a recruiter for the South Central Bell in Birmingham, Alabama from 1975 to 1985. He co-founded the Black Managers Association at South Central Bell headquarters in 1978. In 1985, he moved to Atlanta, Georgia to work as a programmer at Bell South Services. After leaving Bell South in 1988, Michael joined Practical Solutions Incorporated as a software developer. While there, he designed and developed an order processing system for Terry Manufacturing Incorporated, which at the time was one of the largest Black-owned companies in the U.S. Until 2009, Michael was a software analyst for JDA Software Incorporated, where he maintained POS systems for Eastern Mountain Sports and Advanced Auto. In 1997, Michael began private voice study and in 2002 made his operatic debut with AmeriColor Opera Alliance, singing the role of Escamillo in Bizet's Carmen. Yes, claps, claps, claps. In works by Sharon Willis, he premiered the roles of Pawpaw Silas in The Great Divide, Thibaut in La Roche, John Taylor in Three Dream Portrait, and Professor Prothero in Herdones. In his Atlanta opera debut, Michael sang the role of the Undertaker in Gershwin's Porgy and Bess. Michael sang with the Lawrence Weaver Chamber Choral and the Cascade United Methodist Church Chancellor Choir and Men's Chorus. He has been the baritone soloist in Gabriel Fauré's Requiem and the Seven Last Words of Christ by Theodore Dubois. He has been the bass soloist in Handel's Messiah at several Metro Atlanta churches, including Cascade United Methodist Church and Christ the King Lutheran Church in Norcross, Georgia. Michael studied physics at Duke University, where he sang in the Glee Club and the Chapel Choir. Now, I'd like to introduce Michael LeBlanc. Born and raised in New Orleans, Michael LeBlanc's journey has been one of diverse experiences and remarkable achievements. After earning his undergraduate degree from Duke, Michael obtained an MBA in finance from the University of Pittsburgh. His professional trajectory led him to spend 26 years at Polaroid, where he held multifaceted roles spanning finance, customer service, distribution, sales, and marketing, including extensive assignments in Europe. Notably, Michael made history as Polaroid's first Black corporate officer and subsequently served as president of Polaroid Asia Pacific. In pursuit of entrepreneurial ventures, Michael transitioned to the dynamic culinary landscape after co-founding a pioneering microbrewery in Oakland, California. His entrepreneurial spirit thrived as he ventured into upscale dining, opening an acclaimed Southern fusion restaurant that earned prestigious accolades, including 2 Michelin Bib Gourmand Awards and recognition as Oakland's best restaurant from Oakland Magazine. Earning further accolades as Entrepreneur of the Year and recipient of the NAACP Corporate Star Award, Michael's commitment to excellence extended beyond business ventures to impactful civic engagement. His leadership on civic boards and dedication to mentoring at-risk youth underscore his deep-rooted commitment to community empowerment. Now embracing semi-retirement in Las Vegas, Michael remains poised for new adventures, leveraging his wealth of experience, visionary leadership, and boundless passion to embark on his next chapter of impact and innovation. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce Theodore Segal. Segal had a 30-year career in private law practice, during which time he provided corporate counsel for large institutional clients, many closely held businesses, and numerous individuals. Ted served as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University Law Center and was selected by the Legal Times as one of the top 10 deal makers in Washington, D.C. Upon retiring from law practice in 2016, Ted returned to the study of Black and white student activism at Duke in the 60s, work he began as an undergraduate at the university in 1977. His book, Point of Reckoning, The Fight for Racial Justice at Duke University, was published by Duke University Press in February 2021. Throughout his career, Ted has been involved in pro bono legal activities and work on behalf of nonprofit organizations. Currently, Ted serves on the Duke Library Advisory Board as an at-large council member of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Duke, as a member of the board of Manna Incorporated, and on the Emeritus Board for the Children's Law Center in Washington, D.C. Previously, Ted served 2 terms as board chair for Children's Law Center and on the boards of the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke, National Archives Foundation, Junior Achievement of Greater Washington, and as a member of the Federal City Council. Now that you know our panelists, I want to highlight Destiny Benjamin, who is the host and moderator of this program. Extra claps, extra claps. Yes. Destiny has been working extremely hard these past few months to make this event into a reality. She has put copious amounts of time, energy, and effort into making sure that we can all gather here tonight. And I speak for everyone in this room when I say we are all extremely proud of her. Please give her another round of applause and welcome her. Yes. Well, thank you. First, I want to say thank you, Vaughn, for that wonderful introduction. Can y'all hear me well? Okay, perfect. But yes, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say thank you all for coming out for this event. As Vaughn said, I've been working on it for quite a few months, but it's been on my mind for much longer than that. I'm so thankful to the panelists, Mr. LeBlanc, Ms. LeBlanc, Mr. McBride, and Mr. Segal for joining me and being at this event. But yes, so as stated, my name is Destiny Benjamin, and I would like to formally welcome you to Revisiting the Takeover, a commemoration of the 55th anniversary of the Allen Building Takeover. So a little bit about me. I'm a junior here at Duke from South Carolina, and I'm majoring in African and African American studies and minoring in political science and sociology. And I'm also the founder of my blog, What's Our Destiny? You'll see the logo in the top right corner. And I created this blog on May 19th in 2020 on Malcolm X's birthday. And so with my blog, I like to highlight both the challenges and successes of African Americans in both, in both the past and present as we look toward a brighter future. So with my website, I've written structured essays like The Cost of the Good Life, which discusses environmental racism as a civil rights issue. I've written poems like Ghosts Are Real to Black People, where I discuss the ghosts that reside in our history books and sometimes in uniform in the present day. I've written rants like Your Thoughts and Prayers Are Not Enough, just days after the shooting of Buffalo that took the lives of 10 Black people. And I've written reviews like You Better Call Tyrone, when I had writer's block and wanted everyone to know my opinion on the movie They Cloned Tyrone. And recently, I've also started kind of wanting to grow my presence more on social media. So on Instagram, I do a lot of videos, collaborative videos with Black Duke and other students. And I also do infographics, etc., on both Instagram and YouTube, which you can follow at What's Our Destiny. Shameless plug. But needless to say, I'm very proud to be standing before you all today and that this day is finally here. I think that if you asked me my junior year of high school, when I started this blog, if I knew I'd be standing before you here today doing my first event, I'd probably believe you because I was pretty ambitious from a young age. I'd actually probably be a little bit surprised that I didn't do it sooner, but this is my fourth year of the blog, so we're starting here, only up from here. But yes, as you can see, I like to talk a lot, but you'll be hearing from me a lot, as you can probably see on your programs. But going into the Allen Building Takeover and the reasoning for this event, these are most of the pictures that we recreated this past month here on campus. So learning about the Allen Building Takeover for me was a key moment when transitioning to Duke. As an African and African American studies major, the activism and protest of Black undergraduate students at Duke since 1963 was a consistent theme in most of my classes, and I was fascinated every single time I learned about it. And in the fall of my sophomore year, in 2022, I had the idea to recreate photos from the takeover for a project for my blog and a social media post. However, I did think in 2022, that was the 54th anniversary, and though every year is a year to celebrate the Allen Building Takeover, I was thinking, the 55th anniversary, let's celebrate it, commemorate it then, and just wait a year. And so now I put it on the back burner temporarily, but through wisdom and guidance from multiple mentors, from professors on campus, it's materialized from just a project recreating photos to this panel that you see, that you're here attending today. And so I'll have some time at the end where I'm a little bit more thorough in my gratitude, but I just want to say a blanket thank you to everyone who has helped me get to this point today. And for all of you for being here and listening to me talk and listening and coming to hear from these esteemed panelists. So before we get into the panel, I just want to give a brief history of the takeover. I know some of you may be familiar, but for those who are not, I'm just going to give a brief summary and then we'll get started with the panel. So on February 13th, this day in 1969, Duke's Afro-American Society organized the Allen Building Takeover in protest of the racial inequality that Black undergraduate students experienced on campus since they first integrated in 1963. About 50 Black students occupied the Allen Administrative Building with a list of 11 demands. What started as a peaceful protest on the part of the students was gradually escalated by the administration once the police were called, who responded with tear gas and immense physical violence against the students. All of this occurred while white higher-ups isolated themselves away from the chaos. One of the quotes that I think represents this day well is at the bottom of the list of demands, and it states, "We seized the building because we have been negotiating with Duke administration and faculty concerning different issues that affect Black students for 2.5 years, and we have no meaningful results. We have exhausted the so-called proper channels." And I think this last sentence especially is just very important and impactful, because oftentimes the proper channels were typically those that were passive and prolonged. And so I think this demonstration of the Allen Building Takeover just showcases that we can't always rely on a system that is working exactly as it was designed to bring about change. And so as a result of this rich history of Black student activism at Duke, current Black students now benefit from organizations like the Mary Lou Williams Center for Black Culture, living learning communities like the Mitchell White House, which is named after 2 of the first Black students to integrate the undergraduate program, and then of course the African and African American Studies Department, in the midst of a whole plethora of other Black organizations that we have here on campus. And so just to transition, we're now gonna go into the panel now that we have this brief summary. So yes, I first would like to start by asking a question that most students here have asked on our applications in coming to Duke, and that is, why Duke? Why did you choose to come to Duke I'm sure you all were just very educated, and so I'm sure you had a plethora of other options to choose from, but why did you decide to come to Duke?
First of all, thank all you guys for being here. This is amazing. Glad to be back. Let's see. Coming from New Orleans, I went to all-male Black high school. And I guess right at that time, maybe 2 or 3 years before that, major institutions started recruiting and letting Black folks in. And the high school that I went to, normally you go from, Catholic schools go from 1st to 8th and then 9th grade. They started a program for 8th graders. They had a citywide test. You had to have a minimum IQ of 125. And there was about 28 of us that got selected. And for 5 years, we had to write 500-word essay every week. We had to read 30 books a year. And they geared us towards going to Ivy League schools. And don't laugh, but I was planning to go to Yale and actually applied to Penn. And I decided I didn't want to go to an Ivy League school because they didn't have women. True story, after being in an all-male situation for 5 years, I wanted to go to classes with women. Then on top of that, I wanted to go north. And North Carolina sounded north. And I knew that Duke was a good school, and it was equivalent to going to an Ivy League. And I was real clear that for me, for some of you of a certain age, you remember Father Knows Best? I wanted to be Jim Anderson. I wanted to wear a suit. I wanted to have a 2-story house, and I wanted to come home in the evening in my coat and tie and sit down and wait for my wife to cook. I decided that the way to do that was to go to a majority white institution. And then on top of that, to go to one that was very good. And so North Carolina, Duke, I was going to the north. And so that's how I wound up here at Duke. And I just thought it was a great institution. So that was how I got here.
My story is shorter. My guidance counselor told me that this was the place to come. From the time I was in the 6th grade, I wanted to go to Howard University, and that's where I thought I was going. She calls me into her office. It was either junior year or senior year, and she says, "Catherine, you know, you are a really good student. Some of the major white institutions in the South have begun to admit Black students, and I would like for you to apply." I think you will get in, and I think you will do well. I hadn't thought about it, but I decided to do it. And of course, after I got accepted, the community, my parents, the school, everybody was so happy. It's almost as if they put the burden on me to come. Because there was something in the Black community that we called responsibility to the race. And if you felt it, you would have a tendency to do things because it helped to move the race forward. And before I give this to Mike McBride, I would like for the other members of the Allen Building Takeover to please stand. I want to acknowledge you in the audience right now. Yes, and yes. Bill Turner, Charles Beckton, Brenda Beckton. And so for you three, if we sound like we're not getting it right, please come on up here and help.
When I was in high school, there was an organization called Nest for Nest, National Scholarship Service Fund for Negro Students. It was sponsored by the United Presbyterian Church. They gave standardized tests to Black students, and then they would try to hook them up with predominantly white schools. Well, not just Black students, minority students. They sit in the Southwest and in the South. So they connected me with Duke. I was accepted at Duke and at Wesleyan in Connecticut. I wanted to go to Wesleyan in Connecticut because that was farther north. My dad said, it's going to cost a lot of money for you to travel back and forth to Connecticut, so you go to Duke. So I came to Duke. I can't say that I was impressed, though, by the materials that Duke sent because they bragged about the size of their library, and that impressed me. I think at the time they said it was the 19th largest university library in the country. And they seemed to be proud of that, and I thought that was a good thing.
I came to Duke in 1973. Hard to believe it was only 4 years after the Allen Building Takeover, and I guess I came to Duke because it was a good school, and I got in and really didn't give it a whole lot of thought, but my folks wanted me to go to Penn, so I decided I would go to Duke.
Good answer. Well, we're glad that all of you chose Duke, of course. I want to get a little bit closer, building up to talking about the takeover. Hearing from Mr. and Ms. LeBlanc and Mr. McBride, how was it being a Black student at Duke during the era that you were here, leading up to the takeover? What was the environment like that sort of fostered that drive that led up to planning and organizing the Allen Building Takeover?
Coming from New Orleans was about at least 40% Black. And when I got to Duke, it was a shock in that I could go 2-3 days and not see another Black person. That was unnerving for me. And then the friends that I made in the dorm, if you would see them on the weekends and they're with their girlfriends or something, when they got close enough to speak, something would get in their eye or the conversation would change so that there was no eye contact and no acknowledgement of you. I had a professor in political science, Suke Simpson, and he used to address me as Negro. And I was 17, and the first time that he did it, it absolutely rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't know what to do. Second time he did it, I stood up and told him that at the time we got there, we were still Negroes. We hadn't gotten Black yet. And I told him I'm a Negro. And he said, okay, I understand Negro. And so I went through a semester of that. And um, in addition to that, that was some of the bad stuff. Some of the good stuff was actually finding other Black students. It took a while for us to find each other from September to October, and then we took over one of the tables in the cafeteria, and that would be a meeting place, and then the bench out in front that the KAs used to own. We kind of took that over, and that became a meeting place in between classes. For me, after driving from New Orleans here, one of the first signs that I saw was a billboard that said, "Welcome to KKK country." And so that was kind of like the environment. Now, I was in the deep South, and remember, I made my decision because I was going north. And so I was totally in shock. And New Orleans had a lot of activity as a big city, and I found this to be a big cultural adjustment for me. But again, once I found the Black students, it became a lot more tolerable.
All of us grew up under segregation. And so coming to Duke was the first time that I had any kind of interaction with white folk. And it was like coming to a foreign land. I didn't really know what to expect. And, but I was open. What I didn't like is the way this society had conditioned so many of us to believe that Black folk were not as smart as white folk. So I didn't really know if that was true or not. And I had an A average all of my K through 12 career. So I didn't like that. But I knew I was going to have an opportunity to at least explore and see what I was worth. I was one of 8 Black women that were admitted that year. That probably doubled the number of Black women that were on campus. And we didn't really run into a lot of other Black folk because at that time, women stayed on the East Campus because we went to the women's college. And so the folk that looked closest to what I had left at home were the people who cleaned our rooms, made our food in the cafeteria, and gave us big smiles. Now, I like that a lot. And they were the folk that some of us gravitated to because we were still seeking to create a form of community for ourselves. And as Mike said, when we started finding other Black folk, was when a sense of community really began. And when we started the Afro-American Society, we really found out where the rest of the Black people were. So I think I'll leave it there, Mike.
What was that question?
Your experiences.
Well, me, it was a little bit wondering. I hadn't been around Black people. I had a white roommate who was and I didn't suffer any difficult moments. I guess the most difficult, I got in an argument with Allen Building because he took exception to my saying I thought it was fine for him to go fight in Vietnam, but it didn't make sense for me to go fight in Vietnam. Now he couldn't understand why. He wanted to attack me, and my roommate said, "Well, I think Mike is regret that he got something different to fight for than he does. Other difficult moments were our encounters with certain members of the football team. They always seemed to rub each other the wrong way. And it seemed that what kept us from attacking each other is that they were so large, and they swore that we were armed. So it was just a tension. We would face off. I remember one face off where screaming at each other. And then one guy says to me, "Have I given you any excrement?" I said, "No, I haven't given you any excrement." He said, "No." I said, "Why don't we why don't we go back to our dorms?" Which we did. But none of my classmates did tell me they had different plans for certain professors. I was fortunate not to have those in the physics department, and though I was told by one professor that others didn't want me there, I did not get that invitation.
I'd just like to add some of the other things that were going on campus, because the Black students who had been here, at least several years before we got here, had begun talking to the administration at least 2.5 years prior. Because, it's a darn shame that when you went to football games that the band strikes up playing Dixie. We all know what Dixie means, and then folk were flying Confederate flags. And then a major thing was that the president of the university belonged to a segregated country club that didn't allow Black folk. And so even when our few Black athletes at that time, when they had the awards program, which was held at the segregated country club, our folk couldn't go because they couldn't get in. And I mean, there were things that were so insulting that you would have thought that they would have been taken care of before we got here. But what we really experienced is that when they made the decision to allow Black folk to enter, the belief was that we would come in and assimilate ourselves to whatever it is that we found here. And there was absolutely nothing done to take a look at what could be done to create a more welcoming environment for Black students. I think the position was, you all should be glad that you all got in and just come in and be happy and not really raise any kind of ruckus about anything.
Thank you all. Mr. Segal, you mentioned in your book about a plantation type system that seemed to be like pervade Duke during this era. And I think we can see that in you all's responses as well. But you said you started at Duke about 4 years after the takeover. And so contrastly, how did your experience compare, one as a white student, but also in the years after the takeover? Do you think there was a shift in like how the environment was on campus between white and Black students? Just what was your experience like from your perspective?
This was one of the big realizations about myself that I had in the course of writing the book, because I came just 4 years after the Allen Building Takeover. By that point, Terry Sanford had come in, liberal governor, as president of the school. And basically, the way the history got told, even just 4 years after the takeover, was that Duke had some racial issues. The Black students protested. Terry Sanford came in, and now we're basically good. And as a white student, I was just willing to accept that and oblivious to the fact that not only were most of the issues that had been protested over still issues for Black students at Duke, but there was activism that was ongoing that I was not even aware of as a white student among Black students when I was at Duke. And so I think that white students developed this very kind of comfortable notion that we're beyond all that. And at least speaking for myself, just we're not aware or were blinded to the reality that not that much had changed for the Black students at Duke. So that's how I would answer that question.
Thank you. So now that we have those two perspectives, I want to actually get into talking about the takeover. So, Mr. McBride, I have a question for you. You were chairman of the Afro-American Society during the year of the takeover as just a sophomore. And we had this conversation on the phone a couple months ago. We also talked about it upstairs with some of the students. But can you describe to us, you said that you actually did not want to be chairman. So can you just describe that story for those who have not heard it yet and how you ended up actually still being chairman of the Afro-American Society?
Yeah, I was a little fearful of becoming chairman because I was a sophomore. And there were upperclassmen who I thought were better thinkers than I. But I also didn't want to just come out and say, no, I don't want to be chairman. So I thought I would give a speech in a way that would scare people from electing me. So the words I remember delivering were, if I'm elected, my administration will be an administration of accelerated militancy. When I said that, my friend Tony Axum leaned over and said, Mike, you're going to win now. Because they, especially the students in my class, wanted someone they thought would be uncompromising. And I had that image of one who would be uncompromising. So I was elected.
Mike wore black all the time, had a beret. Was your image of a militant. And he was very thoughtful and very insightful. So it was like no question.
Of course. I just love that story, so I wanted y'all to hear it too. But okay, so leading up to the takeover, Mrs. LeBlanc, as a Black woman, in a lot of the photos we see of the takeover, Black men seem to be at the forefront. So I wanted to hear your perspective as a Black woman of like what your role was in the decision making and during the takeover, what the environment was like. Just a perspective from as a Black woman versus the picture we see most frequently being of Black men.
Let's start with the fact that there were a lot more Black men on campus than Black women. And like I said, when my class came in, there were 8 Black women and I think 33 Black men. And at that time, we sort of doubled the number of Black folk that were on campus because ours was the largest class that had been admitted up until that point. So just sheer numbers. But my sense is that the leadership really acknowledged the input of the Black women. Brenda Armstrong was the second chairman of the Afro-American Society, with Chuck Hopkins being the first. And Brenda was a spitfire kind of person, short in stature, but full of fire. And I know that for Chuck, Bertie Howard was one of his most trusted advisors. The other thing I would say about the role of women is that we always had an equal vote and an equal voice in everything that happened. And even as we were, having the discussions about whether or not we were going to go into the building or whatever, the folk who were taking the lead in the planning, and I think both Bertie and Brenda were a part of that, they would present it to the group, and then the group voted, and everybody's vote counted. And when we actually got in the building, there were a couple of times when we took votes. There was a vote around whether or not the women should leave the building. There were already more guys than women, okay? And the vote was that the women should leave. But the guys will tell you that it had more to do with them wanting to, quote, protect us. And at our 50th reunion in 2019, Chuck Hopkins, who is who led the whole process, essentially told us that they were probably being a bit chauvinistic. But he admitted that, but he also acknowledged it was all about protecting the women. And when it came time, and so most of the women did leave. And then we took a vote after it was real clear that the police and the National Guard were going to come in. We took another vote as to whether or not we would stay or go. And at that time, our esteemed leader, Charles Beckton, sitting over there, he was recording the vote, and he told us that there was a tie. And so Howard Fuller, who was a community leader, essentially said to us, I just want you all to think about this because all of you could end up being dead. And we took another vote. And at that time, Charles Beckton informed us at the 50th commemoration that the vote had changed. Somebody had changed their vote, and it now was majority leave. And what Beckton admitted to us that day is that the vote hadn't changed, but he decided it was time for us to get out of there. But the important thing is everybody's vote counted.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, to this date, I thank Charles Beckton for being here.
Thank you, brother. We probably owe our lives to you.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask a few more questions before I open it up to the audience. Mr. LeBlanc, I'm actually going to come back to you. So can you talk a little bit more about how you all were able to take over the Allen Building? I know even today it's the administrative building. It can be a little daunting. So how did you all go about taking the building over? And how long did you occupy it? What was that like?
It's like a Mission Impossible task. Everything was so coordinated. Everybody was so committed. We had a U-Haul truck, and we were all at Charles Beckton's place. And also there were students outside of the building, and we had it timed for when we were going to get there and who was going to do what. The truck pulled up, and about 35 or 40 of us got out of the truck, ran into the side of the building. Those that were in front had let us know that it was okay. And when we got in, the door was chained. We got everybody out of all the administrative people out of the building within a minute and a half to 2 minutes. And after that, it was locked down. Nobody got harmed. The worst thing that happened was one of the guys, Vic, yelled at a lady and said, "You better get your ass out of here." And other than that, there was no harm or anything done, and it went as smooth as you could possibly think about it. And as Catherine said, during the day, um, we had people leave. And I think we were in there from maybe 8:30 until about 5, if I have it right, somewhere around 5. And some of the students would come to a side window and let us know what was taking place. And when Howard Fuller made the comment that you could die in here, they had amassed a number of Durham Police and the National Guard, and they were coming in. They were not happy. The administration was not happy. The administration had given us an ultimatum, I think by 9 o'clock, that we had an hour to get out of the building. And then some of the leadership were negotiating back and forth with the administration. And then they told us, we got to get out. And as Kat said, we had a vote. There was about 12 of us left. And again, I thank God for Beckton, because I remember Kent State had just happened, Orangeburg, South Carolina had happened, and so there were students getting killed. And at that time, Durham police had an opinion of Duke anyway, but then black folks being at Duke and taking over a building, not my city. And so I'm glad that we left, but it was very interesting.
Destiny, I would like, and Charles, it was more than 12. What was the number there toward? Like 20, 25. Got it. And Ted, it would be interesting for me to have you share with the audience how, when you were doing your research 4 or 5 years after the takeover, you actually had a chance to talk with the president of the university at the time of the takeover, Douglas Knight. And when he was asked about calling in the police or the potential of violence, I think if you would phrase the question that you asked around whether or not it was easier to consider doing something like that, would you please speak to that?
I think I was the first person, even though I was a young graduate student, I was probably the first person from Duke who had ever, since he had been run out of town, reached out to Douglas Knight to kind of talk about his Duke experience. And over the course of 3 interviews, he really opened up to me and almost looked at it as sort of therapy sessions. But toward the end of our 3rd interview, we had kind of talked about his decision-making process. He told me, first of all, what a feeling of relief it was when he finally called in the police, because after years of trying to balance all these different interests, he finally had this feeling, well, I've done something definitive. And then I asked him, Dr. Knight, was it easier to call out police on black students than it would have been on white students? And he said, absolutely, that's just the nature of things. And he said that without any hesitation and just that directly, which obviously is a remarkable comment. And yeah, the silent vigil, which had occurred 10 months earlier, a predominantly white protest, much bigger. There were only a very small number of black students, but in that protest, the university did everything it could to avoid any kind of confrontation, down to calling out the Durham police to protect the protesters on the quad from more extremist elements in the community, whereas just 10 months later, when Black students are in the building, it took the university just 1 hour to decide to call in the police. It was later in the afternoon that they were actually brought right onto campus. But the contrast between the two events, that's part of the narrative in the book, is just really stunning.
Thank you. And actually, Mr. Segal, while I have you talking, I wanted to ask one additional question. Actually, I have two more questions, and then we can get to the audience. But so we've all been fascinated by learning about the takeover, learning about Black student activism at Duke. And you wrote a book about Black student activism. So how did it go from just learning about Black student activism at this university to then wanting to write and publish a book about it?
So I was briefly in graduate school at Duke and started a master's thesis on Black student activism. That's how I ended up interviewing Douglas Knight, a bunch of other administrators, Brenda Armstrong, Professor Turner, back in '79. But I ended up dropping out of graduate school and my master's thesis was unfinished. 40 years go by, I have my whole life, my family, my career. And when I retired from law practice, I decided I would just go back and for the heck of it, finish that last chapter of the master's thesis. So I had this extraordinary opportunity to be a 60-plus-year-old looking back at myself as a 21-year-old and seeing how did I view the world then, how did I view the world now. And it was such a compelling and startling experience that the more I got into the research, the more observed I became, and really the more I began learning about myself and some of my own blinders. So it became an intensely personal project. And then I was blessed to have all sorts of people, Val Gillespie, who's here, I think Wesley Hogan is here, others at Duke, Bill Chafe, really became part of this team that supported me. And it ended up being just one of the best experiences I've certainly had the chance to really delve into and write this book.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So a last question from me. As we know, this is Duke's Centennial year. So in the context of that, though you're no longer students here at Duke, what are your hopes for the university as it moves into its next 100 years?
That's an interesting question. Let's see. My hope is that all of the different ethnicities that come to Duke finally get integrated into the Duke experience. I think, like when we got here, we desegregated the place, but it wasn't integrated. I see a lot of progress when I'm told that we have. I thought if we had 200 Black students, I would be happy, and we got like 800. But I also feel some of the same frustrations that we had. So my big concern is from the Duke is a microcosm of what all colleges were going through. And I'm afraid of what's happening to the country right now and what can happen with this next election coming up. And depending on what happens there, my wish is for Duke to realize, just like with the country, its full potential. I think there's been a tremendous amount of progress, but as you always hear, we still have a long ways to go. And so I'm hoping that Duke can be in the vanguard of getting true integration and equality.
I'd certainly ditto that. And my wish is that for every student that is admitted to this university, that they really have an opportunity to belong here, to feel that they are welcomed here, and that they are provided with any and everything they need in order to flourish. I wish that for the students. I wish that for the professors. I wish that for the administrators. And I definitely wish that for the folk who make it possible for all of us to be here. And those are the folk that are cleaning the rooms, they're cooking the food, they are cleaning the, keeping the lawns clean. My wish is that everybody has an opportunity to flourish here.
Well, what's left to say? I wish for this university what I wish for any institution of higher learning. To me, a university is a place that you have open inquiry where you can confront your ignorance and share your perspectives with other searchers. What is amazing to me is how long it took me to realize how ignorant I was when I was here. And this place, places like it, give you an opportunity to reduce your ignorance somewhat. Unfortunately, when we're young, we're not usually the best students. Maturity helps quite a bit. So I would hope that students coming in can confront their ignorance and share their perspectives and not be threatened by other points of view, that we can interact and try to persuade each other.
I would just add to these comments by saying that Duke, as we all know, is to be congratulated. It's made immense progress in the area of diversity. Duke is justifiably proud that it has a majority-minority student population now, but as important as that is, and as much as Duke has done to support separate affinity groups that kind of comprise that diverse student population, what I hear from students today is that the sense of inclusiveness, what the panel has been talking about, the sense of belonging to a shared Duke experience has still not been realized. So my hope would be that Duke could go beyond diversity to true community and inclusion, and that would be my hope for Duke in the future.
Are there any questions from the audience? Sorry, let me see what my phone is. Wait, can I use one of these? Okay, Ani is coming. Thank you. Okay, can you, I think there was one over here. Yes, Tiana.
I first want to say it truly is an honor to be in y'all's presence. Like, I feel like the Allen Building Takeover and early Black Duke is heavily ingrained in the experiences and like shaping the experience of Black Duke now. I'm curious about kind of the physical space of planning something like the Allen Building Takeover, since planning something like that, I would imagine, would require some elements of like ensuring that like it was planned without, you know, knowledge or people knowing that weren't supposed to know. So I'm kind of curious about the elements of like the space of planning that and how that, even just like the whole process of being able to plan it and ensure that it went the way it did.
Well, I think that there were folk who lived off campus. I think we've cited one of those places several times since we've been here today. But for the most part, when we had votes as an Afro-Am society, most times we were on the campus. But lots of conversations taking place off campus.
Okay, we would meet in the social psych building, and that would be the entire group. There would also be meetings, small meetings in the Afro-Am Society room, and then a lot of the planning was off campus, as Kat said.
Earlier, Mike, about the people who were outside and handing stuff in. So I think the most unifying thing about the event was all of us unindicted conspirators who were at the meeting the night before, who didn't go in the building, but we didn't say a word, and nobody knew. So that was the most fantastic thing about it. We did all the planning, and we went to class like nothing had happened, and people said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "I don't know." but we were there, and we shared the event. But there were a lot of people who weren't necessarily in the building, but we were part of the experience, because we knew why, and we actually knew when, but we didn't say anything.
I think this was a very important event, and hopefully there's some administration people that are here now as well. But I have a question for the author. When you interviewed Dr. Knight, did he talk about why he or his administration never participated in any of the Black celebrations that occurred on the Duke campus? That's my first question. And Catherine or Mike, let me know what you felt or what you saw when you were in the building from the other students who might have been milling around. So that's an important question, but I'm surprised that Dr. Knight hasn't gotten a worse rap than he has from my experience.
Well, Dr. Knight was a classic, progressive liberal who had the view that I'm all for racial progress as long as nothing changes for me, right? And he was singularly ill-equipped, just from a skill set perspective, to handle the kind of confrontation and divisiveness that played out at Duke under his tenure. And he was frankly destroyed by the experience. He left Duke. He came to Duke at 42, the youngest major university president in the country. He was the shining star in academia. And by the time he left, he was a broken man, and in fact was unable to go back onto a college campus, even for the graduation of his own son, because these events were so traumatic for him. So he deserves a bad rap for not pushing harder than he did for some of the changes he said he believed in. But he was also a man who was just caught in a situation that he was singularly ill-equipped to handle. William Anlian of the medical center said Douglas Knight couldn't go to bed at night unless 100% of the people he spoke to were happy with him. Terry Sanford, as a politician, could sleep happily as long as 51% of the people were happy with him. And so Douglas Knight is in many ways just kind of a victim of circumstances, even though he is responsible for not fighting harder.
I want to speak to the role of the students outside of the building, because one of the most touching things for me, and it still brings tears to my eyes, people like Mark, sitting over here, Mark Pensky, they had a group of white students lined up along the walkway when we did make the decision to come out. And they were all there seeking to shield and protect us, because they knew, we knew, that if the university could identify who was in the building, we were probably gone. And they were everywhere just protecting us. I was so grateful, Mark, for what you and all the white students did. The other thing in terms of strategy that I would like to mention is that, and this speaks to what my fellow partner from class of 1971 shared. When the university decided that they were going to put all of us on trial, they had been able to identify about half the folk who were in the building. And a strategy of our brilliant legal team was for us to all consider saying that we were in the building, whether we were in the building or not. And so I'd say the vast majority of Black students on this campus, whether our names were known, whether we were in the building or not, all said, I was in the building. Okay, because the strategy was, it's not likely they're gonna put all of us out. They're gonna do something, but they're not gonna put all of us out. And Beck, I wonder if you would be willing to just say a word or two about that strategy, that legal strategy, because it worked.
When James Ferguson came down to talk to us about representing us, he kept referring to Allen Building as Allen Hall. And he kept saying, when did this start? We said, well, they didn't do this. He said, no. When did it start? And it occurred to us he meant when we first got here for 2.5 years. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And the strategy came about as Kat is, I keep calling her Kat. As Kat said, that everybody decided to sign up. I've been here. As I recall, they only identified 17 people. I saw the list at one point. And they didn't have photographs. We were shielded by white students. They were all around the building, all on the quad, in addition to being along Campus Drive. And because they couldn't identify anybody, the strategy was, once everybody said, were you in the building? Because they can't figure out the culpable liability of any one person. Can we kick these 7 out? It might be who weren't in the building. Can we kick this 15 out? It worked. And the hearing panel, actually headed by the dean of the law school, Ken Pye, actually mentioned that in the decision, that that is why they didn't kick anyone out. We were suspended, pending good behavior, and that was good behavior. While I'm up, let me say that the planning for the takeover happened over a couple weeks. People were assigned to go into Allen Building to diagram everything in there, the exits, where everything was. We knew when the safe would open in the bursar's office, when the records safe would open. We got in there the moment the safe was open. The records were exposed, and that was our bargaining chip. We're here with the records. We had people with walkie-talkies who didn't go in the building outside, keeping us informed about what was happening on the inside. They were mostly athletes who did not want to lose their scholarship or their ability to play ball, who agreed to stay on the outside, letting us know what was on the inside. I had fellow law students who came. By the way, I was the only non-undergraduate in the building. I was a third-year law student, and why I went in that building when I got to take the bar 2 months later, I don't know. Maybe because Brenda, my wife, went in. Her mother claimed she went in because I went in. But we had people mapping out everything, almost military-like precision. The truck was rented. People jumped on it at my house, drove around the circle until it was time for the clock to strike 1. Mission Impossible, did you say, Mike? That's exactly what it was. But the planning took place over a series of meetings, some on campus, in the building that Mike described, some in the AAS Society, and some at my place and other places off campus.
There's another level to this, and some people did know. I was friendly with Chuck Hopkins. We were the same year. And we felt that at the vigil, when the vigil happened, we lost control of the narrative because the Duke News Bureau offered their facilities up on the Circle at that time for all the out-of-town reporters. So they offered their phones, their typewriters, et cetera. And we felt when that happened, we lost the narrative. We didn't want that to happen again. So I had a meeting with Chuck and Alan Ray, my roommate, who was the editor of the Chronicle, and that office overlooks the campus. And we agreed that we wouldn't let that happen again, and that Chuck would call us, or call me, I can't remember which, the night before and let us know when it was going to happen. He did, and we decided we would make the Chronicle offices, with all our phones and all our typewriters, that would be the headquarters for the out-of-town newspapers and the out-of-town broadcast people. And we also agreed that the statements that would come out of Allen Building would go through us. So in order to get the information, they had to go through us. And in that sense, at least for the first few days afterward, we were able to control the narrative of what was happening.
Thank you all. Let's get one more question, maybe from a student for the last question. Oh.
I'm always worried about being recalled for the defective education I got at the law school. In any event, the three of you have excelled in the fine art of raising hell and creating change. And now that you've done your work, the logical next step is coaching. So what would you coach the students of today to do to keep the progress rocking forward the way you made it rock forward?
I would have, I think about organizational dynamics and what works. And so I would have a structured environment for the students in which you get, what I've heard from the students is that we get a lot of promises in our meetings, but nothing happens or it takes forever to do. So I would have a situation in which I think the students have to engage as many of the students as possible to participate. And you're always going to have a core group that does most of the work and carries most of the load. And I would have those folks, when they meet with the administration, have a timeline and tasks and deliverables that were going to be done, and that they meet periodically on a systematic basis to go over what was promised, what was going to happen when, and has it been delivered on? If not, why, and what are we going to do to catch up? So that just comes out of my corporate background. It's here's a task, here's what we agreed to, make sure that everybody buys in, and then continually meet with the people to see if the milestones were met. And I would encourage them to also meet with other folks that have maybe graduated from Duke, because it's a burden. And I know from being in corporate America, one of my colleagues said that we have a black tax, and that tax becomes a burden on you sometimes, and you get tired, for carrying it on. But you are that vanguard that will carry it on. And so sometimes you need to go to somebody else to get a little shot of encouragement or, a different perspective, because it does get daunting on you. But I would say task, milestones, meet, why not, why, and just make it steady, and don't give up, and realize that it's going to take time. Now, we don't want it to take time, and that's what I like about the energy of youth, is that we ain't waiting for 20 years. We want it now. And I think that passion just has to be there as well. So that's what I would do.
I would think about, I'm thinking about, what would I say from the wisdom of what I have accumulated and learned at this age compared to what I was like at 19. And it does sound similar to some of what Michael is saying, because you don't want to stifle the passion. You don't want folk to feel as if they're not being heard. And yet, our experience tells us that all institutions are hard to change. It doesn't matter whether it's university, hospital, government, you name it. But if you do have the passion around wanting to change something that is going to make a difference for the people that you serve or the people who are coming behind you, then it's going to require persistence. And it's going to require creativity. And it's going to require having mentors who are willing to stand with you through thick or thin. That requires people who are willing to risk what some folk consider the things worth having, whether it's a good job or whatever. Seek out a professor who is willing to say, I'm going to stand with you, regardless of the impact it may have on me and my livelihood. When you find folk like that, those are the folk that will help you to bring about change because they're willing to put it all on the line. Just don't want to stifle that passion of an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old.
Mike, let me add one thing just that Kat reminded me of is I would coach them on having coalitions outside of their particular group, just like with Mark and Chuck. And I found out that when I was at Polaroid, having coalitions, just like Kat was talking about a mentor, reaching out to someone that's not in your group and having them become part of, championing your effort, I think that would help.
They give practical advice. I'm not a practical person. To me, the most important thing is to be optimistic that you can actually change what it is that you want to change. That way, that keeps you going because it is often difficult. It is not for the weak-hearted. When you are 19, waiting 2 weeks for an organization to get back to you with a progress report is a hell of a long time. You don't want to wait 2 weeks. 2 weeks is nothing to me now. But when I was 19, 2 weeks was a long time. But we believed that we could effect change in the institution by what we were willing to do. We never thought that it was not going to happen. If you believe it's going to happen, then you will continue to try to make it happen. As soon as you become pessimistic, you become discouraged. So, it's hard to change institutions. It's hard to change people. But having the idea and the optimism about what it is that you want to change will give you the energy to keep going. And you will find allies. And they won't always look like you. There are people who are sympathetic or empathetic, who will share your values, who don't look like you. Every person who looks like you is not your ally. And people who look different from you are not necessarily your enemies or your opponents. So be optimistic and accept help from whatever quarter it comes from.
Excuse me. Thank you all. Well, first, let's give another round of applause. Okay, so before I'm gonna do like a brief description of the photos and then we can conclude, I actually want to invite Isaiah Hamilton up really fast. He's our Duke Student Government President. He's gonna say a few words and then I'll come back up.
Hey y'all, how y'all doing? Apologies, I came in late, was running from another event. First, wanted to also share another round of applause for Destiny and for the guest panelists today. And when Destiny was asking me to speak, I really wanted to use this opportunity as a time to speak a little bit more candidly, if I may, kind of just about the experiences of my peers, myself, over these past few years, and a lot of gems that could have even been pulled from the last minute or two of being in the back and just listening. So I can only imagine how the past hour or so has been in here. But yeah, I wanted to, something that's been really laying on my heart recently is that we've been hearing a lot and seeing a lot and experiencing a lot about this Duke Centennial, right? We see the hundreds kind of plastered all over this campus. But something that's really like stuck out to me is that Duke is celebrating 100 years. Black Duke is not. We have not been here for 100 years. We have not paraded these halls. We have not hung up banners for Black Duke celebrating a centennial. Similarly, the change in which people and generations of people have been advocating for is still an ongoing fight. It is not easy to necessarily invoke the change that we've been hearing about. And as we continue on and we look ahead for these next 100 years, it's a difficult inflection point. I think it's one in which people can come and really find themselves absorbent of the Duke culture, the Duke narrative, and really cling to that. But then you kind of have to ask yourself the question on the flip side of that coin of really what does that mean, right? Like what is Duke? What is Black Duke when you dig a little bit deeper? And for me, it's always been a community of resilience. It's been a group of people who have constantly, for generations and decades at this point, again, fought the good fight or have said, as we were hearing just a second ago, 2 weeks is not enough. We want to do the change now. I find myself in my position as student government president constantly kind of fighting that fight in terms of, yeah, there's a lot of things that I think we could all agree and point to that we want to change, that we want to correct, that we want to course correct and put back on the right trajectory. And that is not an easy feat. I'd say it takes a constant educating. It takes constantly teaching others that come after us of saying, here's the reasons why we're doing the things we're doing. Here's the reasons why we're advocating for these things, because it was not always this easy. It was not, Duke was not a place that was built for somebody like me to be standing here speaking to you today. That's just the plain facts. It was not a place where we can celebrate 5 national championships, a majority of those people coming from African or African American descent during those 5 championships. It wasn't always that way, right? So you have to constantly keep this caveat in the back of our mind of the things we cherish and who helped to bring those into fruition. I think of giants such as Julian Abel or Samuel Dubois, right? Of people who brought Duke to the point we are today, to where we can be in this room, to where we can actually invite people back from the Allen takeover and celebrate that as a good moment in Duke's history rather than one of triumph. And, I don't want to appear to be pessimistic whatsoever. We're in a good place. Like, we're in a far better place than we have been. And there's a lot of people here. I see a lot of familiar faces out in the crowd right now who are there as these allies, are there who are going to help collaborate and make these things that we want bring into fruition. But the reason why I was really excited to come here today and share this space with y'all, and again, much kudos to Destiny, is because it's a perfect point for us to look back and reflect on these things. And although the photos are different people in different clothes, generations apart, they share the same message, right? They hit home, and I think they still bring goosebumps to so many of us. And that's because there's this underlying message of, again, what it really means to be a Black student at a PWI, but more specifically a Black student at Duke, right? There's no institution like Duke, especially one that's in the South. I'm from North Carolina. I didn't think places like Duke were even made for me, right? And those of you that know me, I, again, come from Royal, Northeast North Carolina, came in as a COVID baby during all that, during 2020. So yeah, it's been a constant uphill fight, but what has been very refreshing and nourishing for my soul has been that regardless of the year, whether the leaves have fallen off the trees or not, something that has always murmured about this place is there's people who really just give a damn, pardon my French, but there is people that really care. And if you're willing to share your thoughts or speak up or stand for what you truly believe in, there's going to be people, to the points that I heard in the back, aren't going to always look the same, such as you, aren't going to believe in the same things as you, and that's okay. And if anything, in my experience, what I've learned so far is that is what you should encourage, right? It really takes breaking down these barriers and reconstructing again to help set anew, and start. For places like Duke, with the institutional history that we have, it is even more important and paramount that we continue to trailblaze, because it is important for the generations yet to come. I see myself as just a conduit of change. I see myself as somebody who can be a messenger and echo the changes that I hear for people, or my peers. And if somebody brings something that they think is silly to me, such as, I don't know, maybe their water doesn't taste right. I don't know. I'm just citing random things. But if it's important for somebody else to speak up, I think it's our job to listen closely and ask ourselves why it's important for them to speak up. Because there's been enough people, similarly as places as Duke, who have been silenced in years past. There's been enough people already who have been shunned from identifying the way they choose identifying with, or believe in the things they want to believe with. So now it is our job in this moment of time, as we look forward, to continue that and to continue to echo the things that we're hearing. And if we see somebody who might not feel comfortable enough to speak up, I urge you to ask yourself why. There's a lot of operations that happen at high levels in big pictures at a place like they're here. But again, it's really the intimacy of the people that are on the ground doing the work. We have over 25 plus Black affinity groups who all do amazing work to do amazing things year in and year out. And it's our job to constantly share those stories, uplift those things, collaborate with one another, continue to amplify these messages. Yeah, again,